is exactly right. And actually, it's kind of a good segue, too. Because it's not really putting you on the spot, I would poet, because you tweeted it. And I love the tweet, but maybe you know where I'm going with this. I just wanted to read this tweet of yours just a couple days ago. And to be clear, I love this tweet. But maybe we can just talk about it real quick, and you can elaborate, extrapolate. Iota Poet said, "Shimmer is nice to play with, but let's be absolutely clear: the future is Iota. Always has been. Shimmer will never compete in the same realm as Iota. It can't. Even the Iota Foundation doesn't market it. They know, I know, the game plan is clear. Iota is the one. Iota 2.0 and the Iota EVM are the real game changers that will start Iota's meteoric rise. Shimmer, I respect you, but Iota will step out of the shadows and show it's really possible." That's a great tweet. It's a very truthful tweet, very factual tweet. One which I will say, like the Shimmer EVM, the Shimmer network, as we all know, is the staging network for Iota. Dom has said, where Iota goes, Shimmer goes. Iota's success, if Iota's successful, it's because the staging network Shimmer helped it along the way. But I totally agree that Iota, that's the big one. It's always been the big one, right?
Yeah, I think it's like a really important question in terms of like the philosophy of Shimmer and why it's there in the first place. Because I said, like, this is a line that even the IF have said in the past, where Shimmer's for the degens and IOTA's mainnet is going to be for the business adoption. And for me, if IOTA is going to compete with Ethereum, Cardano, etc., it needs to build up as much liquidity as possible. The more liquidity on the network, the more TVL, the more use, the more attractive it's going to be. And it's like a snowball effect where more use and the quicker it grows. But if you divide that liquidity across two networks, then you're basically naturally giving yourself a disadvantage. And that's kind of the essence of what my tweet was about, was it's going to be hard to win if we were kind of splitting the community across two networks rather than having the one space where you have degens, you have your market adoption, you have everyone using that layer zero, as we like to call it in IOTA. And then you have the layer ones and then the layer twos on top of those. So then the sort of underlying main chain is getting all that use and people are collecting mana, etc. That's kind of how I envisioned it. But I don't know what other people's thoughts are on that.
It's interesting. Can I chime in for a sec?
Yeah, Isaiah, please. Yes. And so welcome, by the way. Welcome.
I think that. Thank you. Appreciate it. I have a different perspective. I don't come at it from a TVL point of view, but it's a really interesting point when you talk about separating, the liquidity between different networks. My comment and perspective would be, I think it serves a much more core purpose if we look at open source technology that's used in the enterprise today as an example. Right? Typically, you'll have a community-driven project that is upstream that allows you to pivot very quickly, allows you to prototype new capabilities, interact with other ecosystems or technologies, but you don't run it in production, right? Like you don't run the first version in production ever, and if you do, you're in for some hard times in IT. So I think there's something to be said for having that staging network that allows you to prototype the art of the possible, so to speak, but allows you to transition to a more production-ready, resilient-grade network, for when you want to scale it and run it in, public sector or private sector. But very interesting point about the TVL. So,
yeah, 100%, dude.
That's what I got.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Poet.
I was just going to say, I think that's a great perspective as well. And I think that is like the counter argument, isn't it, for Shimmer, that you need that sort of battle hardened network to test upon as well and not release it onto this, hopefully in the future $1 billion network that may cause issues. So I definitely agree with that approach. Yeah, I think it's going to be a really hard decision for the IF going forward. And I can see why they've done it in the short term, because they need to move quickly, they need to catch up. And that's why they've put Shimmer out there. And I think it's working. You can see all the great projects that are coming on Shimmer, Shimmer C, as we said earlier, Tango Swap, etc. But then I think it's a solution now, but it's going to become a problem for them in the future that they're going to have to solve, similar to assembly, And whether they have to pivot in the future, we'll see.
Hopefully, it's a good problem to solve. How do we combine? How do we merge these two thriving ecosystems with huge communities? And maybe it starts. You know what, guys? Maybe it starts with community Shimmer spaces. Adorable. I'd like to welcome IDiota. How are you doing, sir? He's still traveling. He's taking time out of his holiday to hang out with us. What's up, dude?
But I'm actually traveling, so I'm sitting at the airport right now, listening to the space. Haven't made it to the first one, unfortunately. So I was quite happy you you crushed it. So I can join for the second one. um, yeah, I wouldn't agree with what your the poet said about Shimmer. I really think it's pretty open, whatever is going to happen. I think real world adoption will come to Yota anyways. So I think that probably won't stay on Shimmer for too long, because there's good reasoning to keep it on the, I would say, more tested, more battle tested and safer network. But I wouldn't be too sure about the whole DeFi and GameFi stuff. So I think liquidity could change networks pretty quickly as soon as the first bridges are coming between the networks, and then we'll basically see if there's a first mover advantage or not. But other than that, I wouldn't be too sure about how it plays out TVL wise.
No, it's an interesting point, idea, but I wonder what you mean by in terms of you're not sure about the liquidity, because again, and I think it's great that we're having this disagreement in a way, because this is what I want, and I like listening to spaces like this where you have people who have strong opinions on things. So I think it's quite interesting. But for me, it's like, why can't, of course, the business and market adoption will come to the IOTA mainnet, but why can't the degens be on there as well? Why not have them both on there?
Well, I think it would mainly depend on the first movers, huh? Why should I put my liquidity that I have on Shimmer going through, I don't know, some bridges that are already there, or some bridges that will come in the future, and I bridge all my assets to Shimmer? Why should I move to Yota?
That's a great point, and that's kind of what I was going to say as well, really quickly. Is if I'm already on Shimmer having a great time, everything's working, and it's good, I'll just keep doing DeFi on Shimmer, in my opinion. And also, really quickly before you respond, Poet, Matt Yarger's back up. I'd love to hear his take on this after Poet speaks. But also, anybody in the chat, if you have an opinion on this sort of, it's not it's not really even Shimmer versus IOTA. It's Shimmer and IOTA. Please request to speak. I'd love to bring you up here. But go ahead, Poet.
Yeah, I agree. I just want to reiterate that I'm not trying to put Shimmer or anything like that. I think it's really useful, and it needs to be implemented now. So I agree with that, definitely. Before I get killed. But I'm looking at it more in terms of like the long-term vision and how IOTA competes. And I just think if you're spreading the TVL and liquidity across two networks, then you're going to be at a disadvantage, because again, people look at DeFi Llama, as Mikey does every morning. People will check that out and go, oh, look, there's only this much on IOTA and this much on Shimmer, whereas they're both combined, it's going to stand out a lot more. And again, I just don't see why. There's no technical reason why degens can't have like layer 2s, layer 1s on that IOTA EVM in the long run. So surely the more use on the layer 1s and layer 2s are going to feed the layer, quotation marks, the layer 0 underneath, and make that more secure in terms of, and there's going to be more mana generated, etc. So long term, but I can definitely see the arguments. I agree that, if people are already on Shimmer, then why would they transfer across if everything's working? The only reason I can see them doing that is if, the IOTA mainnet is a lot more powerful, it's a lot quicker, and there's a lot more different dApps on there, and people can, it's a lot more interoperable between the different dApps, and I can see people want to take advantage of that than being in more of like this isolated Shimmer environment. But again, I will just have to see how that plays out.
Maybe to just add a few more sense to that. I think you have a good point, and especially if we're gonna see, let's say, IOTA based layer that is basically running a lot of layer twos, and some might even have governmental use cases and so on. And if those layer two use cases might empower people to run, let's say, more sophisticated DeFi apps as well. So if we really get that into connected world, then I would say you have a pretty strong case for IOTA, because we're gonna likely see more real world adoption there on IOTA and also on those layer twos. And if we find possibilities to somehow enable those real world use cases to work together with DeFi applications, then it's pretty likely IOTA will have the stronger case here. But and I wouldn't disagree where I would neither agree nor disagree. So I would just leave it open. I think we just can't say how Shimmer and IOTA will behave in the future.
Sure, we love speculating. That's what these spaces are for, by the way. And and I agree with Poet. I agree with IOTA. I don't agree with Corball, anything he says. But I would love to hear from Matt Yarger, the founder of Digital MRV, previously DEMIA, and also formerly of the IOTA Foundation. How's it going, man?
Howdy, howdy. Can you hear me fine this time?
Yes, sounding crystal clear. How's
Sorry,
it
I
going?
got a call that came in like right when I requested to speak last time. I think we're looking at like Shimmer versus IOTA from purely like a financial perspective in this conversation. And I think it's important to talk about like the two different groups. One is, yeah, we want the financial market to come in and adopt the tokens and everything. But when it comes to building, the like user that we're focusing on is the engineer. And Shimmer is really there to give engineers a playground that's lower risk than going straight to IOTA, so that they can come in and fuck shit up and figure out what works and what doesn't work and have some kind of financial opportunity tied to it, but not to the degree of going full mainnet IOTA layer one. So I think it's important to like understand the difference in the users that we're trying to bring onto the two networks, because Shimmer is really trying to get that level of like innovation and testing that we need to bring to IOTA in the first place.
Absolutely. And again, like as Dom said, and he said it a couple times in many different social media on many different social media platforms, where IOTA goes, Shimmer goes to. But again, all that to say, Poet, I totally understand, totally get it. I agree. I agree with everybody. You know what? I'm kind of like the fence guy. I just sit on the fence.
That's what makes you a good host.
Well, right. I like the way the fence makes me feel when I sit on it. You know? So